Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're back again this week. We missed last week just because there were all kind of scheduling conflicts that you ran into and that I ran into. And then those conflicts got resolved, but it was too late really to come back and put the show on the air. Because still I had to be, I think it was at Allen County at 5:30 for a volleyball match. I think is the way it all kind of worked out, I think.
Well, that was Monday. That actually got canceled to move to Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But the time all that happened, it was kind of too late for us to do anything about.
Yeah, so apologize for missing last week. Some weeks are just crazier than others. And to be honest, we're going to just start this show out trying to, as best we can, explain all the craziness of last week and the result of some of that. And you and I think, talked on the phone about this a little bit. The baseline result, and let's just start there, was that athletic directors in our area were forced to deal with things that I really just don't think they should have been forced to deal with in terms of like moving tournaments, dealing with schedules, as we've already said, dealing with teams having to cancel at the last minute, things of that nature. And I know Warren Cunningham had to deal with that in terms of the district volleyball tournament. Brandon Combs down at Warren East had to deal with that for the girls' regional soccer tournament. And it just was wild and woolly. And I know they probably fielded a lot of phone calls, but this is the baseline result of everybody begging the KHSAA to let decisions be made locally. Instead of having kind of an overarching how we're going to handle these things coming from on high. And when you get right down to it, that means your athletic directors, I guess, and your principals, superintendents, perhaps even get involved, have to make decisions that really are just, to me, they're above their pay grade in terms of what they have to deal with, John.
Yeah, it makes it difficult because you're right. The KHSAA has basically just given recommendations.
Yeah.
Which is good in one sense. It makes it difficult in another sense, and every school basically looks at things a little differently. So when you're having a tournament and in which you have 4 schools, like in the district, or 8 schools for the region, if you're running that tournament, you're actually trying to work with 8 different schools and their policies.
Yeah,
which can be really hard to do, to be honest with you, because certain schools will not play if your county is deemed in the red, and other schools will play, and some schools will play at a different spot, and then you throw in what happens if your team actually is quarantined or whatever. So it can be complicated, but I will say it's better than I thought it was going to be in June when I didn't know we was going to play at all.
Right.
But it is from a management perspective. It's a little bit difficult, to say the least, to try to work it out for everybody.
Well, and you mentioned that each school district kind of handles each of these things differently, and I think that's the bottom line problem that we run into when it came to these playoffs this past week. And football playoffs are 2 weeks away, all right? And I imagine we're going to continue to run into these issues. And the football playoffs may be, that's going to be curious to see how that works out. But let's go back real quick. So even within our county, okay, when Barron County is a red county, Glasgow's school board has set forth a policy of how they're going to handle that. They're not going to play in a red county, or they won't host while they're in a red county, and I don't think they'll play in a red county, which came into effect initially last week. But Barron County has it different. Their school board looks at it differently, and I'm not exactly sure what theirs is, but they have played. They've hosted games when Barron County's in the red and that kind of thing. Now, some counties won't come to a red county. Some schools won't come to a red county. So then you got to deal with that part of it. And so I think that's the part that gets trying, especially if you're like an athletic director, because you don't know what each of these schools' policies are going to be when you're trying to coordinate these events.
Especially for a tournament. Now, if it's just 2 teams playing, then that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's is you have to decide for yourself, are you going to play, and then the team you're playing has to decide. That's pretty simple. But when you throw in multiple teams,
right, and
then the stakes goes up a little bit higher because it's the district or regional tournament. Losing you go home. Then it really takes a lot of cooperation among the schools and so forth to basically give everybody, no matter what school that you attend, you want to give everybody that opportunity to play. Mm-hmm. You don't want to force somebody to forfeit because their policy is different from yours.
Yeah,
and luckily I think the athletic directors at all the schools, whether it's Kerry Hardwood at Adair County, who's really good. Allen County, I'm sorry, who's really good, and Craig Cassidy is good, and Warren is obviously good, and then John Pettit. Mm-hmm. Those four guys work really well together. Yeah, and they finally got the situation with volleyball fixed, where everybody got that chance. Moved it to Allen for one night, and then it came back to Barron the next. And, for the most part, the soccer was they moved one game because of the weather. They had weather issues. But with soccer, they had a little bit more time to play with. They had the whole week to do that.
Right.
You're not going to have that opportunity in football 2 weeks.
Right.
You either play that Thursday, Friday, or Saturday of the playoffs, or you're out.
Yeah. Well, and so one thing that came today, I guess later this afternoon, that has come out. The field hockey championship was supposed to be tonight, and it has now been postponed till a later date. The KHSAA didn't even say what that later date is yet because somebody who was on one of the semifinal teams tested positive for COVID, and so they're having to do the contact tracing. Now, I take it was not one of the teams that was supposed to play in the championship. They didn't really extrapolate that information very much. They were trying to protect, I guess, the identity of the player or staff member, whatever, and so. But they didn't say when the championship will be played. But now, a
little different in field hockey. There's only roughly 30 schools in the state that play it.
Right.
And they're already to the semifinals, finals anyway, right?
Yeah. So this was the championship.
Okay, finals. So they've got plenty of time to play that within the next week or two.
So with the football, then I don't know what happens at that point. I mean. Because they've tried real hard during the course of the season to not punish teams that have to make decisions related to COVID. So instead of giving them a loss if you have a positive test, or your school district says you can't play, your school board says you can't play in that county because it's in red or whatever, they've just done that as an RPI 0. We talked about that before, the COVID cancellation RPI blah blah blah, whatever is on the schedule. But you can't really do that in the playoffs, and so I don't know how they're going to resolve a circumstance like that.
Yeah, you're out.
Yeah,
it sounds resolved. If you can't play because of COVID, or your school has a policy that won't let you play, then you're out.
Right.
I don't think there's anything else you can do. They're not going to halt the entire playoffs because 4 or 5 teams in one area can't play. Because you just shove everybody else a week. It's going to happen the next week. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen the next week. I mean, that's just the way it is. Now, once they get toward the end, that's a little different. Because once you're at the last round of the state finals, you could conceivably push that back a week, but you can't do it when you're going through 5 rounds of football.
Right.
I don't see it. I just think that's going to be the tough part right there, and coaches are going to have to be really, really stringent on once you get to the playoffs about practicing and how you do that and keeping groups separate and so forth, and I don't know how every school does it. If somebody on your team has got COVID, does that mean everybody's out? Well, that's not how they do it in college or the pros, but I don't know how they're going to do it in high school. Well, again, I think it's each school.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. We have seen some school districts handle this differently. If there was a positive test of a player or staff member related to a team, where they don't quarantine them for the 2 weeks, they test everybody and they do the contact tracing, and if nobody else comes back positive, I don't know how many times they test them.
And you got other schools that cancel up to 2 to 3 weeks.
Right. I mean, and so
I think it just depends on where you are. It really does. It depends on where you are, what your school does, and what the local health department says.
Yeah, which also led me to last Monday advocate that they just needed to pause all the playoffs for 2 weeks. That's what I thought they should have done right then, because now there were people who were like, well, there's no way they can do that kind of thing. And I thought, well, sure they can if they decide they want to. I mean, maybe there's some logistics to be worked out.
The only thing I would say is I think you're going to run into the same issues 2 weeks from now. It just doesn't seem like this thing's going to slow down any.
Yeah.
If anything, it'll get worse.
You are going to run into the same issues 2 weeks from now, but at the same time, the teams that were not able to play because of positive test or policies may be able to play 2 weeks from now.
That's right, and somebody else will have it 2 weeks from now. And then what are you going to do?
I don't know. Pause it 2 more weeks. you pause it, and I mean,
and you'll be 22 years old and still waiting to play.
Hey, look, the history of some high school sports has suggested that people were 22 when they were playing anyway.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Those bad old days are gone, John. But I do think this is the problem that we run into when we start discussing, what's fair and what's unfair. The
virus is unfair.
The virus is unfair, and it doesn't care what you think.
No.
And our cases have gone up both here and across the state, and hospitalizations have gone up. And so, it's a serious thing. And I think the same thing that we've said so many times before, John, is still the most important thing. We just have to be kind to each other, and we're going to have to learn to live with some things that we didn't know we were going to have to learn to live with in this life. And hopefully that helps us grow and be stronger as we go forward as people, I would hope.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope something good comes out of it.
That's as of right now, that's the only good thing that can come out of it.
That's exactly right.
So, anyway, it was a wild and crazy week last week. And for those who were like, well, thank goodness that's past us, it's not. Yeah. I mean, we're going to run into some issues during football.
And basketball.
And, speaking of basketball, practices officially start today.
Sure does.
And I've talked to a lot of people around basketball, and they're not concerned about the season as much as they are about the logistics of having fans and spacing people in gyms.
We're going to play.
Yes.
How it looks, don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if they do a coin flip to decide who gets the ball to start, don't rant and rail at people about that. I mean, it may seem silly, but I mean they're coming up with everything they can to make sure we can play, and that's really the objective we should look at, I think.
I agree.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's Glasgow. When we come back, we're going to talk about football.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, we had a couple of football games in our area on Friday night. I guess actually, technically speaking, Glasgow's game was in Liberty, which is I don't consider to be in our area, even though that's in their district. And then Barron County hosted Meade County. With a shot at, if they won the game, they were guaranteed to host a first-round playoff game for the first time, I think, in 20 years. And things were looking okay, but in the second half, Meade County, I don't know if they just put a wrinkle in their offense, but they found their man, and they gave their man the ball. And I think Barron ran 11 or 12 plays in the second half. It was I guess, kind of a classic Meade County second, what we've seen from Meade County in history, a team that can just run the football effectively. And they did, and Barron just never really seemed to overcome what Meade was doing, and they ended up losing the game 24-14. I would say that, from what I understand, the tiebreaker situation will be decided by RPI. And the Central Hardin North Hardin game that was supposed to be played Friday got canceled. It'll be played this Friday. But when I was looking at the RPI, Barron's RPI is fourth in the district. So it would seem no matter what happens between North Hardin and Central Hardin on Friday night, Barron's probably on the road to North Hardin for the first round of the playoffs.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, you have to see how Meade finished. Meade still has two more games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these RPIs change every week. Barron does not play. They play Metcalf, and a win over Metcalf I don't know how much it helps them or not. Metcalf has played pretty well this year, but Meade has a good DeSales team coming up this week.
Yeah,
and so the RPI is not set in stone. But getting back to the game, yeah, I think it's fair to say from the Barron perspective that it was a disappointing loss. 24-14. It was a very winnable game. Meade County was 1-4 or 1-5 coming in the game. Now, listen, Meade's got a great tradition and they played a good schedule, but Meade was coming off a loss to Central Hardin.
Yeah, pretty lopsided.
Pretty lopsided. A team that Barron beat 14-13. So, and just watching the game play out in the first half, Barron could have easily won the game. It was Meade County was a team that just basically can't throw it. I think they completed 2 passes for the entire game. They were very limited offensively, and Barron moved the ball fairly well in the first half. Jamison Bowie played really well in his first half. He and Gage Allen connected up to 2 touchdown passes. The second one was a fantastic scramble by Bowie and catch by Gage Allen. That was pretty dynamic. Oh, it was a tremendous play. And we had a lot of momentum going. And in the second half, I mean, it was if anybody watched the Missouri-Kentucky football game, that's the way the second half went for Barron, in which Meade County dominated the second half. They had the ball probably 80 to 90% of the game in the second half, and 2 players just killed us. There were 2 running backs, and we just could not stop them. Opal is a kid that had like 189 yards, had 1 touchdown called back. Yeah, and we just could not stop them, and it almost looked like to me it kind of took our will away from us. It just we couldn't get the ball back and couldn't stop them, and Meade goes on to knock us off 24-14 in a game that was a very important game, where you could basically lock up second place in the district and stay away from North Hardin and to host the playoff game, and it was a game that was winnable. Now listen, injuries are a factor in football, and Barron did not have 2 of the better players, Gavin Withrow, who's really had a good year, running back and defensive back, and Aiden Miller, who was like our leading tackler and also an offensive player. So those 2 players were really 4 starters. Yeah, and it did not help that we didn't have them. But besides that, I think that's a factor. But still, we had an opportunity. I thought it was a fair opportunity to knock off a good program in Meade County, and we just came up short.
Yeah, back to that RPI thing. Meade County's last 2 games are at DeSales and versus Beechwood at home. Well, their RPI is not. They're going to lose both those games probably. They may win one of them.
Their RPI should not drop.
It won't go down. It's barely above Barron's right now. I think it's their RPI is 46,412 and Barron's is 45,505 at the moment. And of course, Central Hardin's kind of in the same boat in the sense that they play North Hardin, and then I think they finish up with, let's look real quick. They finish up at Apollo. So their win or lose those games, their RPI is not going to move a whole lot either. I mean, the best thing, Barron really needed to, like you said, their game this Friday's been canceled. They were supposed to play Edmonson County. Edmonson County and Metcalfe County, losing to them would kill your RPI. Beating them, though, may boost you enough that it could get you over the hump to not be in that 4 slot. But, I guess that's the way it goes in the year of COVID.
Yeah, it does. And we had control of our destiny, too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because we went up there and knocked off Central Hardin, and a win against Meade County would have solidified, for the most part, our destiny. But it is what it is, and came up short. It's not like we wanted to lose or anything like that, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Glasgow went to Casey County and rolled over the Rebels. And then talking about injuries, they've had the injury bug this year as well. I mean, they're without their starting quarterback, John Carter Myers, at the moment. Easton Jesse, a freshman, is stepping in there. I think he threw 7 passes in the game, which was just enough. But really what they've done is they've just gone to a stable of running backs. I mean, they got Kieran Stockton, Jaden Wyrock, Jesse's running the ball a little bit, Hunter Scott. They've just gone to all the different people they can find to run the football, throw it a little bit at this point, and just mostly play some solid defense otherwise, at least in that particular game, which I think locks up the 2 seed for them in their district. I know they still have a game against Adair County left. I don't foresee them losing that game without they will play it on November 6th without something disastrous happening. I mean, Adair and
Hart are both down.
Yeah, they're both down. Glasgow, like I said, they're kind of each week getting better and better at this thing that they're having to do without Myers in there at quarterback. And so, that's just an improvement as they keep going. This Friday, they have a good game. They play Franklin Simpson. That should be a dandy. Franklin started out the year rough. They're playing a ton of sophomores.
I don't think Franklin is near the level they were.
No.
Their coach left. That tells me a lot.
Right. He went to John Harden.
They went to John Harden, and they started off with a couple of they've actually lost to Russellville. They lost to Russellville and Allen, but they've come back, and they got a good win against Warren East and who else did they beat? Was it Warren Central?
Yeah, they beat Warren Central 49-20, and they beat Warren East this past Friday 35-28.
Right. So it's a game that Franklin will be will be a physical team that Glasgow will have to deal with, and the question is can Glasgow just use their running attack to knock off Franklin? I'm not for sure about that. I think you're going to probably have to be a little bit more balanced to do that, but it's a game that. If Glasgow was completely healthy, I would think Glasgow would be the favorite.
Oh yeah, and playing at Franklin will be a test as well. Franklin's last 3 games, after they lost that game to Russellville, and then Allen County really kind of stepped on them 28-7. They only lost to Russell County 28-21, and then they won their last 2. So I think they are improving, and they in Glasgow are kind of in the same boat in a way. They lost probably a lot more just raw talent than Glasgow did from last year. Lost their coach, as you said, but they're playing young and they're improving. And Glasgow's kind of been forced into that same way of playing some younger players a lot more probably than they had intended on it. And so they're kind of in the same boat. They both seem to be kind of, hopefully, I guess, for Glasgow, catching their stride as we close in on the end of the season here, John.
Well, that's what you want. And, of course, there's just 2 games left. And, of course, it's such, we've already talked about COVID until it's no need to talk about COVID, but you just cross your fingers and hope that you get a chance to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not saying that the playoffs aren't going to be canceled. I'm talking about you just cross your finger that you can be healthy enough to play.
Yeah, you don't have any positive tests
right.
and or any other kind of restrictions. And, look, we've seen this both in high school, I think, and in college and in the NFL. Injuries are just having a huge impact on the football seasons. Just the normal injuries that you have during the course of a football season, but it just seems like, I don't know if it's the depth is a factor or the lack of preparation coming into the season because of some of the restrictions. I have no idea, but it seems to really make some wild swings, and I don't know if that's the case. You mentioned that Kentucky-Missouri game. Kentucky comes off of a good win against Tennessee, and then they come in here, and play Missouri, a team I'm sure everybody thought they should beat.
They were awful.
Yeah, and
now all of a sudden, after coming off a good win, now their offense has really been exposed because they outside of the Ole Miss game, their offense has not been very good.
Yeah,
and now they have a complete quarterback controversy that I don't know if Terry Wilson or the other one, the Auburn transfer, I don't know if either one of them is all that good, to be perfectly honest with you. And it's like a recurring problem. Last year they won without being able to throw. Because of the dynamic play of Lynn Bowden. Yeah. And now they don't quite have that, and then it becomes a recurring – then Coach Stoops does a tremendous job of recruiting, and you could just tell they've got Division I. They've got NFL caliber players, especially on the defensive side. Yeah. But they don't have that quarterback, and after a while you're going to have a hard time getting receivers if you never throw it, and it's one of those – situations where
self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
The fan base gets a little upset when you just get. Missouri had like 26 first downs to Kentucky's like 8. And they had the ball like 2/3 of the game. It was terrible to watch, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that was just not what.
And it's Missouri.
Exactly.
It's not like it's Alabama, and Kentucky still got Alabama, Georgia, and Florida.
Yeah, their season's rough at the moment,
especially when you really don't have much of a offensive threat right now. So, it doesn't bode real well for Kentucky, and Louisville got a good win.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, what an impressive win, 48-16. I mean,
now Florida State's not very good either, but Florida State just came off knocking off North Carolina. It was in the top 10.
Right. So Florida State kind of mirrored Kentucky. They
Yeah.
come off an impressive win or good win. And
Well,
then,
from the Louisville perspective, they put back-to-back good defensive games
yeah,
against Notre Dame, held them to 14 points, and Florida State held them to 16, and then their offense exploded. So
yeah.
that's a little bit of encouraging news. And the Toppers, well, they got a win.
We'll talk about not sure if they have any good quarterbacks. I mean, that seems to be the theme for WKU as well.
They got a win against Chattanooga, which a loss would be bad. But they found a way to win in the last minute. So that part's good. That's Chattanooga's only game of the year.
No.
They only play one. That's
kind of hard to scout a team if they've not played a game for, a year.
And the ending was incredible. If I was Chattanooga, I wouldn't be happy.
Right.
Because they ran after Western took the lead, took what was it, 14-13 or 14-12 lead. With a minute to go, they kicked off, which I was a little surprised they kicked it in the air. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I thought they'd kick it on the ground.
Yeah.
They kicked it in the air, and they returned it 100 yards for a touchdown, and it was the penalty was at
13-10 was the final.
Yeah, the penalty on Chattanooga was that they said they called it for a fair catch, and I can tell you the guy that received it didn't. So they called it on somebody else calling a fair. I've never seen anything like it. And both teams played like there was no fair catch, and then all of a sudden, it was called back. And I think the coach of Chattanooga got an unsportsmanlike conduct call. I don't really blame him.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those. If you were to get a technical in a basketball game in a situation like that, you'd be like, "Thank you."
Yeah,
because you're going to hear it.
I've never seen a fair catch called when it wasn't the guy that. Why would somebody else call a fair catch?
I don't know, but I'm trying to remember. There was a game. It seems like it was in the NFL, but it was not on a kickoff. It was this was years ago, where there was the phantom fair catch call, and it was like somebody standing on the sidelines was signaling for the guy to call a fair catch.
I've never seen anything like that.
And then they like rewarded the fair catch, but then the whole thing went crazy after that. I wish I could remember.
I think it's fair to say that the Tops got a break.
They did indeed, but hey, maybe they actually deserved a break for once.
Sure. But that also means Chattanooga didn't deserve one.
Yeah, well, I don't know what they did in their past life, but meanwhile, you remember that team Liberty that beat up on WKU?
Yeah, they're 6-0.
Yeah, they whipped Southern Miss 56-35 on Saturday.
Yep.
I'm guessing Hugh Freeze won't be at Liberty much longer.
Nope. South Carolina?
Yeah, that sounds good. I tell you what I wouldn't do. I would not give him a company phone.
Well, he will be somewhere.
Yeah, he will be.
He's
he's proven time and again he's a very good college football coach, especially offensively.
Yeah, just ran into some problems, off the field in Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So,
well, but let's be honest. If it's not the institution's phone, do they really care what he does with his off time?
No. And
that's why I wouldn't give him an institutional phone.
And
that way, if he wants whatever he wants to do in his off time, we don't have to worry about it.
And I'm not against giving second chances. So
I'm not either.
So I wish him the best.
Yeah. So anyway, the college football scene was a fascinating one on Saturday for fans here in the state. WKU got a win. Some bad news out of the WKU game. Glasgow's Dalvin Smith got hurt in the game. His mom put out a message that he will have surgery tomorrow. I think it was tomorrow, Tuesday. From what I understand, it was his right knee, and I don't know what the extent of the injury was.
I hate it for him.
I do too, man.
He's had such bad luck.
I think he missed his whole sophomore year or his junior year.
Missed 2 years.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe his freshman and junior years because of injuries in high school. Was doing well.
Yes.
Turning into a real threat, I think, for the Toppers in the passing game.
Yep.
So hopefully everything goes well for him, and if he wants to keep playing football, hopefully he can get back out there.
Yeah, I wish him the best.
Me too, because look, I always enjoyed watching him play sports because he's always been a dynamic player, and he's a great kid.
Yes, he is.
I like all the kids in that family. They're just a super nice group of kids. To be honest with you, I've always liked them all.
He deserves some good fortune.
He does indeed. And so there's that. That's the bad news. The good news is, I guess, Louisville got a win. WKU got a win. Kentucky
got a butt kicking.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
John, we mentioned earlier the trials and tribulations of last week and talking about getting all the tournaments, soccer and volleyball and everything. So real quick, we're going to talk about some of the results of the tournaments last week, and especially the soccer to start off with. The Barron County girls played the defending state champions to a 1-0 game.
In the semifinals.
Yeah, in the semifinals of the Region 4 girls tournament at Warren East. And for all those people who were like, well, maybe they just sandbagged and played 10 in the box or whatever. No, they played them pretty well straight up. I think the only real adjustment that Coach Nyken made from the regular season to that game was playing Hadley Adams, a freshman, in a defensive position. God, I think it was a defensive mid position that he played her, or middle defender. And she's going to be an outstanding and is already a very good soccer player. And her work there, a couple of great saves, especially one in the first half by Gracelyn DeWeese, kept the score 0 at that time. And, I mean, it was an impressive show for Barron. I mean, I know Coach Nyken doesn't believe in moral victories. I'm sure he believed they could actually win that game. But
well, the biggest compliment that I could give to the girls was I missed the first half because I went to the boys and the girls played at the same time.
Yeah.
Across 2 different places across the city.
Yeah.
So when I got to the girls' game, the second half had just started. At first, it took me probably 3 or 4 minutes to figure out who is who, because Greenwood was in all burgundy.
Yeah.
And we were in white with burgundy shorts, and I couldn't tell really the difference, and that's a compliment because our kids were competing just right with Greenwood.
Yeah.
And and then I finally noticed who I recognized our players' faces at first, but I was extremely proud of our kids because they played hard. I've been to soccer games where you can get beat 2-0 and you have no chance.
Yeah, exactly.
No chance because you never get a shot.
Yeah.
And I've been to some of those games where just no chance at winning. You never even get a shot. That's not what happened this time.
No.
We competed. We had shots on goal. And we had a shot inside of the last minute of the game, and just came up short. And just give the kids a lot of credit for, and I give Coach Nyken credit. He's a really good soccer coach, to say the least. I think it's an understatement. But what he did, what I liked about it, he put his team in a position to win. He played those teams.
Yeah.
He played Greenwood, he played Bowling Green, he played all of them.
Yeah.
And I thought you could tell that in the semifinals. We acted like we belonged.
Yeah, there was no intimidation factor
None.
whatsoever, and that's not been the case whenever Barron or Glasgow have generally played, especially in girls soccer, those teams, whether it be Greenwood, Bowling Green, South Warren has come up, but I mean mostly it's been Bowling Green, Greenwood through the years, and those teams there have been a lot of 10-0 losses in regional tournaments, going all the way back when they were all in, I think it was District 8 together, when they were all in the same district, and you go to the district tournament, and it'd be 10-0 games a lot of times there. There have been some close games through the years. I know the Glasgow girls played Bowling Green close a couple of times, and in the region or in the district tournament going back. But I believe when Barron lost 3-0 to Greenwood during the regular season, that was the closest game Barron's girls had ever played against Greenwood. So then to turn around in the regional tournament and go back out there and have a chance to win or at least even tie that game late is just a testament to how far that program's come just in a couple of 3 years.
I agree, because the region is going to go through the Bowling Green schools.
Yeah.
I mean, they win it every year, and they win state titles every year.
Yeah.
And to give you an indication, of course, Greenwood's not only the defending state champion, but they went on the next night and they beat Bowling Green in the final, so they won the region again, and they've already won their first game in the state playoffs. Knocked off, I believe, was it Henderson County or Madisonville North Hopkins? One of those two teams.
Yeah.
So they're in the state semifinals, I believe, already.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it was a good showing. Meanwhile, some things that did not go so well. The Glasgow girls and boys ended up having to forfeit their second round games.
Tough for the kids on that one.
Yeah, because I think they had positive tests on each of those teams leading into it. We had a story on 104thescore.com about the boys game because we found out about that one on Sunday, I think it was. And then the girls, we didn't find out maybe till Monday or Tuesday, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that's the nightmare when you don't get a chance to play.
Yeah.
And everybody else does. I feel bad for those kids and so forth. The Barron boys got a good win in the first round of the region. Knocked off Franklin Simpson. That was a good win.
Yeah, 1-0. Will Fant with a header off of a bounce off of somebody else.
That's a good win, and then they lost South Warren knocked them off, I think 10-0 in the semifinals. South Warren went on and won the region as well.
Yeah, South Warren, Warren Central's kind of owned that district and therefore the region the last few years, and South Warren's been knocking on the door, but they really whooped up on them in that.
South Warren's a legitimate state title contender.
Yeah, I mean, they looked really good out there against Barron. And when you play a team like that, I think from maybe a coach's perspective and even the player's perspective, in my opinion, you look at how good those players are that you're competing against, and I would say say to yourself, I want to be as good as them.
Yeah.
And maybe you go back to work for the younger kids that are on that boys team. And that even is true for the girls, as a matter of fact. And back to the Glasgow boys and girls, the Glasgow was going to have a struggle in their second round game anyway, but they won their first round games. The Lady Scotties beat Monroe County 4-1. And then the Scotties, I can't even remember. Who did they even play in that first round game? They played Russell County.
Yes.
And they won that one. I think it was 8-0 was the final. And both those teams, the girls have quite a few seniors on that team. I think there are about 4 or 5 seniors on the boys team. So it is a shame they did not get to finish off their senior year on the field. So I hate that for them. But when you look at those Glasgow players, for both those teams, they've had some great careers and some milestones they've set during the course of their careers there. And then real quick, we're going to talk about the volleyball. The district was played, the first round games, as we mentioned earlier, were played at Allen County on Tuesday, and the championship was played at Barron on Wednesday. On Tuesday, the Barron County girls beat Glasgow 3-1, and then on Wednesday, Allen County won the district championship 3-0. Allen and Barron will be playing in the regional tournament, which actually starts tonight at Russell County. Allen County's playing tonight, and then Barron plays Logan County tomorrow night, John.
Yes, 5:30 tomorrow night.
Yep.
Be a tough one. Logan is one of the favorites.
Yeah, they're usually, we've talked about this before, you look at, usually it's like Greenwood, Logan County, and maybe South Warren or Bowling Green out of that 14th district are usually the top teams in the region. So, yeah, it'll be a challenge for them. But good luck to them tomorrow night as they play in that regional tournament. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we're going to wrap up some stuff about some MLB, some NFL, and whatever else we may think of. This is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the World Series is underway. We didn't get to talk about this last week. The Dodgers are up 3-2, but let's back up real quick. When they were up, I think it was 2-1, and it looked like they were just cruising their way to a victory. And all of a sudden, the Rays hit a little blooper out in the center field, and that gets misplayed, and all kinds of chaos ensues, and the Rays end up winning that game to tie the series. Did you see that?
I certainly did.
What, as a former college baseball player, what were you thinking whenever that ball was hit the center field?
Well, I mean, it was obviously there's a lot of mistakes that were made.
Yeah, there were.
To be perfectly honest with you,
and not just by the Dodgers, actually, on that particular situation.
It was almost like a little league mistake. When you start throwing it around and everything.
Uh-huh.
And number one, you weren't going to throw the original runner out at home anyway.
Right. It was going to be a tie game.
That's right. So just kind of catch it and get it back in. And so that's the first mistake. And then the next mistake was made when and I have not heard anybody say this, but when the ball was cut off and then thrown to the catcher, I don't really blame the catcher per se, because the catcher couldn't tell where the runner was, so he was just trying to catch it fast and make a swipe tag. The one thing that I noticed, and I've never heard any of the talking heads say it, is that the pitcher was not backing up the plate.
Yeah, he was still standing on the mound, wasn't he?
Well, he was
sort of.
He was in between the mound and third base in no man's land, and if the pitcher was backing up the catcher, that may have saved that run. But he wasn't. He was kind of in no man's land, and it was it was definitely it was a fluky play that 2 errors cost the Dodgers a win, and it may cost them the series. I don't know. The Dodgers came back and the next night, last night, and got a big win. So they're up 3-2. But they conceivably, you would say, should be already celebrating up 4-1. So they kept Tampa alive.
Well, and I also thought on that whole series of play, the guy who ended up scoring the winning run actually made a base running error, because he did that one thing that you don't do. I mean, if you're committed, and he was way too close to home plate to.
Well, he fell.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he fell. I think he was sent home. I think he was sent by the third base coach, but he was like Daniel Jones, the New York Giants catcher. He was heading to the end zone, and he got his head got above his feet, and just he fell. I've done that before, because I kind of run with a lean, and you're going so fast, and sometimes you're leaning and striding too much, you fall. And he did the same thing the quarterback of the Giants did. So I don't think it was a mistake. I think he fell, and then once you fell, then you're stuck.
Yeah. I thought he fell because he tried to tried to change it. Okay, I didn't realize that. No. I just knew that he had fallen, and I thought it was because he was trying to plan how he was going to approach home plate, and maybe he was, but he just was over his head was over his skis or whatever.
That's it. That's the terminology. That's right.
But yeah, it was a calamity of errors to end off that game, and if you're a Rays fan, I'm sure it was like, oh my gosh, thank you. But I still don't. I actually really don't think it changes anything, because Clayton Kershaw has been on fire for the Dodgers.
Well, he's done.
Yeah, he's done.
So he's got that win. So it's 3-2, and I think the Rays are going to win tonight. The Dodgers are not pitching their best pitcher. They've got him saved for the 7th game, and I can see the Rays coming back tonight. The Rays got 2 of their top pitchers left, and the Dodgers have 1. And if the Rays win tonight, that throws all the pressure on the Dodgers, who have been the heavy favorites the last couple of years. And then you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised if the Rays came back and won it. I hope not. And I've never been a Dodgers fan, but I like the Dodgers for some reason. I kind of feel bad for them, because they've probably should have won it the last couple of years. I really like Mookie Betts. I think he's a heck of a player.
Right.
Probably my favorite player in baseball, and I really like their shortstop, Seager. And the Dodgers just they kind of play it the right. I don't know if they play it the right way or not, but I kind of like how they play. I feel bad for Hershiser. I feel bad for Clayton Kershaw, because he's been maligned over the last few years. He's not been as good. He's kind of like the Peyton Manning of baseball.
Yeah.
Not quite as good in the postseason as the regular season.
And, gets a lot of credentials during the regular season, and then has had some really rough outings in the postseason. Right,
and I'm glad to see him. He's already got 2 wins in the series. That's good. So it just seems like to me that I would never pick a team that has a salary of $200 million versus one that has one that's $40 million. I like underdogs, but this case, I just almost feel bad for the Dodgers, and I think it's almost like they kind of deserve. They pretty much kind of got cheated by Houston last year.
There's that.
So kind of for them a little bit, even though it's hard to root against the everyday man Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah. Well, and I can see why people are Rays fans, because, they bring people up in their farm system. They don't have a whole lot of free agents that come and join their team, and they've been competitive. They've just utilized their farm system and
they
coaching.
do it great. Oh, it's unbelievable. I agree.
So, and of course, I believe the Hot Rods are still a Rays affiliate.
They are.
And
they
so,
are.
So we – there's 1 or 2 on their roster right now that were Hot Rods.
Absolutely. The guy that's pitching tonight, the left-hander.
Yep. So, there are reasons to root for the Rays, but I'm with you in the sense that it feels like the Dodgers are owed one, at least in the terms of how things went, especially with the Astros last year. and what we found out after the fact. And that feels like they've been robbed just a little bit without any reward in return.
That's right. And, like I said, I'm normally not a Dodgers person, but I kind of like some of their players.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the NFL has been a fascinating exercise in I don't know. It's kind of amazing, some of these games when I'm watching them. And I will use Exhibit A as the Steelers and Titans yesterday, or the Titans all season long maybe. Because
they play close games, the Titans do.
They not only play close games, they like to try to give up the game in the first half and then show everybody they can come back and hit a three-pointer at the buzzer or something.
Well, the problem with the Titans is defensively they have not been very good.
Right.
Which is kind of the calling card of their head coach, Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
He was a great linebacker for New England. So the encouraging thing for the Titans is they will get better defensively.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can almost promise you they will. But offensively, the Titans, I think they got the most dominant running back in the league, and Ryan Tannehill is turned into he's a top 10 quarterback.
He's an actual quarterback.
He's a top 10 quarterback. He's proven.
I mean, and we see so many of these NFL teams with, people who are getting paid to play quarterback in the NFL, and it's a struggle to watch these people play in a lot of ways.
Well, it's either the haves or the have-nots. Some of them have them, and some of them don't. And, boy, you get one, you better hold on to them.
Well, and, we talked about the Dak Prescott situation a couple of weeks ago, and maybe he should have gone ahead and taken the money before the injury. But I think he's making more money now because
I don't know.
They are brutal without him.
They are brutal without him, but I still think it was a mistake not to take.
Yeah, I agree. It was. But it does show – for all the people who bash on Dak Prescott, being just a numbers quarterback and not necessarily the wins to back it up a lot of times, it shows kind of how bad the Cowboys are around him. And I don't think it was that obvious. Maybe it should have been, especially some of the games they lost last year that we saw them lose after he'd had phenomenal games.
Well, it's another reason why, though, to be fair to Dak, just to be fair to the Cowboys, it's one of the reasons why you can't give Dak every cent that he wanted.
Right.
Because even with him, they were losing.
Yeah.
He just made it more competitive. They need to spend that money on getting better players around him.
Well, and it looks like their money they spent on Ezekiel Elliott was the first mistake.
And the receiver, Cooper, who's okay, but what's the receiver if you don't have anybody to throw it to? And, you have to – in a salary cap league, you just can't give everybody all the money that you want.
Right.
Most of football, you better have a quarterback, but you better have the meat and potato guys.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is when you see somebody like Kansas City. Now, we know they have a lot of great skill players, but one of the things I think gets overlooked for them is that they really do have some good players in other places that get no recognition.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be as good as they are.
I like their offensive line.
Their offensive line.
They're very well coached.
They are, and then you've got, on their defense, they've got some dynamic players as well.
They are. They're average defensively, but you can be average defensively if you're great offensively.
Yeah, right.
And they're average. They're good enough.
Well, and on the flip side of that, one of the things that happens for them is they're so dynamic offensively. Sometimes they score so quickly. I'm sure their defense does not get much rest. It's kind of like the Houston Oilers back in the 80s, early 90s, with that running gun offense and stuff.
Right, and the teams that are playing against you are always in catch-up mode trying to throw and so forth. So it does probably put a little bit more pressure on
it skews what we see, I think, statistically. It probably makes their defense look worse than it is just in a straight-up situation. Because in the playoffs last year, their defense was pretty outstanding.
They were good.
And then, some other interesting things from the NFL, in my opinion, is we have the New York Jets, who are
pitiful.
I think that Kentucky would have a shot at beating them.
No, well, let's don't go that far, but they're pitiful.
But it's amazing. That's what I'm saying. It's
pitiful.
Amazing some of these NFL teams, how poorly they play in every, just in execution. We're talking about professionals. You would think they'd be better at just executing just general football plays.
Well, they drafted Sam Darnold a couple years ago, and in fairness to him, he's surrounded by bad players. But I think they got to take if they got the number one pick. I think they got to take the kid out of Clemson
Tyler Lawrence,
and just have to move on from Sam Darnold.
I'm with you on that front. And the other thing about the NFL, we mentioned that Titans-Steelers game. Those were two undefeated teams playing each other. I really thought when that game ended, despite the fact that the Titans lost on a missed field goal, which was kind of outside the norm, I think, for Gostkowski, their kicker. Well, he's better from more than 50 than he is from under 50. But either way, I thought those were two teams that are actually good football teams.
They are good teams.
But then tonight we have two teams playing each other: the Rams and the Bears.
Bears are 5-1.
Yeah, the Rams are 4-2, I think it is,
right.
or 5-2. And
I don't think anybody would consider them elite, but as Coach Parcells, Bill Parcells said, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah, I mean, and yes, you are. But I mean, the Bears are a team that you look at their scores and you watch some of their games, and it feels like they're 5-1 through smoke and mirrors.
I agree.
I mean,
they don't. I wouldn't fear them if I played them. Now I think they're good defensively.
They are. They're a legitimate defensive team, I do believe.
Yeah, but and the Rams, all their wins is against the NFC East.
Yeah,
I mean every one of them.
Yes, that's what.
So it's hard to tell how good they are.
Yeah, as somebody said over the weekend, I hope they enjoyed winning the NFC East.
That's right.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.